Hey everybody, it's Eric from Barrel Hatchet, and thank you for checking out another Hatchet Cast episode. Today I have a special guest. His name is Byron, and I'm going to save the introduction for him to be able to give. But before we get started, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for checking it out. And today we're going to be talking specifically about why society needs masculinity. But before we just go ahead and jump into it, Byron, welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast.
Thanks, man. You're actually, I think, our first official guest in the studio. So no big deal.
Well, I don't know. The pressure is on.
Remote guest. We did have a person come in, but yeah, no big deal. So give a quick introduction about yourself and what you're actually doing currently in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, I did a pretty long stint, 15 years in the military, most of which was in 3rd Ranger Battalion at the beginning of the GWAT, and then kind of moved my way through the Army, went to the Army Free Fall Team, one of them, the Silver Wings, out in Fort Benning at the time, and then became a Special Forces Combat Dive pre-instructor at RTB, and yeah, that's kind of what I did my military career, and then got out and became a defense contractor like most of us did, and then kind of rotated into different things, such as being a commercial underwater welder, homeless, all of it.
Wow. Literally everything.
Everything.
Yeah. So what do you do currently as far as your business?
So currently we own several businesses. We own BTS Canine, which is Be the Solution Canine. We specialize in severe behavior modifications, family protection dogs, basic obedience, advanced obedience, sport work, a lot, just everything. If you can think of it, we do it.
Wow.
We also are one of the campuses for the Rescue 22 Foundation, which is the nonprofit for service dogs for veterans. It's a nonprofit that provides service dogs to veterans at no cost to the veteran.
Wow.
So that's kind of what that on that side. So
yeah.
and then we have the gun shop, BTS Tactical, which is ballistic theory.
Nice.
Got this play on acronyms there. So the ballistic theory gun shop. We have Ballistic Theory Solutions, which is our logistics and security firm, and that's kind of the big and short of it.
So a jack of all trades in life, and now a jack of all trades in business, which is pretty wild.
I feel like it sometimes.
Oh golly, I have a problem just putting my pants on in the morning. So as far
Don't
as
worry, we all do.
Oh gosh. Well, all right. So let's kind of jump into your background on the mill side. When did you join, and what was your inspiration for going to regiment?
It's something I always wanted to do. Growing up, my father was in the military. His father was in the military. My mom's father was in the military. Both World War II veterans. So I was always exposed to it. My dad deployed in the 90s to Bosnia when Bosnia kicked off. So it was one of those things that was always ingrained in me. The whole planned war and all that stuff, living on military bases and stuff. My son's going through it now, actually. So it's something that I always knew I wanted to do. I joined in. I did the whole reserve depth entry thing. So I think technically I joined in 2001 and officially joined the Army. Went to basic training, everything in 2002. And when I initially went in, I went in with a Ranger contract to go to Ranger Regiment, but there was like a holdover to get into holdover. So they're like, you can't stay here. So they ended up sending to me to Korea for a short amount of time. And then, of course, I left Korea, immediately went to airborne school, and then straight into RIP, which is what it was called back then.
Was there any expediency because 9/11 had just happened in terms of them trying to fast track you through just to be able to get you into it?
I would venture to say there was there was definitely a sense of urgency because of 9/11 and the war in Iraq kicking off. Um, but there wasn't a degradation of standards by no means. I mean, as a matter of fact, my RIP class started with over 300 candidates, and we graduated with, I believe, like 34.
Wow.
So, I mean, and we lost probably. I remember in the first 2 days we lost over 100.
Wow.
It was I could actually it was astounding. Like people were just dropping like flies. Like he's just getting up and walking away. I'm like, what are they going to the bathroom? Like, what are they doing? Like,
Where are you
like,
going?
oh my god,
Yeah.
where are you going?
Yeah,
Like
where are you
I thought
going?
we were friends.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I was always I was too terrified to quit. That was my whole thing. Is like I'm not going to be that
Well,
guy.
I quit every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I had a friend of mine. We went through RIP together. We're still friends to this day. And every day we would be in the front leaner rest getting our crap pushed in. And I'd look over at him. It's like, hey, you want to quit? And we'd be like, yeah, let's quit at lunch. And it'd be breakfast. And then we'd get to lunch and we're like, hey, we'll quit at dinner.
Yeah,
And we
exactly.
and before long, we're standing, they're graduating, but we're still saying the same shit.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Yeah, the man, those pipelines, they are definitely brutal. But it's interesting because like there hit a certain point for me in my pipeline where I was just like, it's just a part of life. It's not even something
Right.
where it was just like a quitting nature. It was just like it's just a part of life, and then life is hard right
Yep.
now, and you just run through it. And it's honestly, it got to a point where you almost look forward to the suck because of the camaraderie and the team building
Right.
asset or essence that you have in that. So by the time that you graduate, I mean, it is an emotional event for sure.
For sure. Absolutely. So yeah, so it was quite the experience. I would say Ranger Regiment's a very interesting place to be. I mean, you're going to be working and walking amongst giants. Um, by no means is anyone that's been to regiment. I mean, there's always people that slip through the cracks, but for the most part, because of the way the regiment has been stood up, there's really not a whole lot of room for dirt bags.
Yeah.
Plenty of dirt bags get through Ranger School. Ranger School is a leadership school. It's not a ninja school by any means, which is one of the things. We're talking about masculinity today. I actually don't have a problem whatsoever with women being in Ranger School. And a lot of guys in the regiment who have these enormous egos, which is probably one of the downsides of Ranger Regiment. Women can't be in that environment. For what reason? Why? It's one, we're going through essentially skill level 1 and 2 tasks, maybe touching on a little bit higher those tasks, but it's a leadership school. We're not learning how to, be a ninja here.
Right.
We're learning how to lead men and women in austere environments, cold, wet, and hungry. And, shoot, people are getting goes because they made a decision, not because they made the right decision. I know guys that, lost entire patrols, but somehow ended up getting a go. Well, why did they get a go? Well, they got a go because they did all of the steps, and just because they lost a battle doesn't mean they were a bad leader.
Right.
Just sometimes, certain things, the Met TCs of the mission, the mission, the enemy, the time to train, the troops available, they didn't have, and that train didn't dictate for them to be able to egress or break contact, and they lost, right?
Yeah.
So, women, I think, an X-ray check can go to Ranger School. So it's very important to understand that Ranger School is a leadership school and not a ninja school, and that I think everyone should be allowed to go to that.
I think there's also there's a big thing about just I think most dudes in the military never had a problem with women in having the same opportunities in terms of what schools or training that's available. It's just the degradation of standards to be able to push an agenda. That's the problem. And that's where
Yep.
it's like, hey, you're doing, it's not a social experiment. This is, can you perform the standard? And the standards are in place specifically because the job requires it or the task requires those types of standards, not because it's, now some ways people say it's a rite of passage, but at the end of the day, like those schools have a mission set, and that is to prepare you with skills that's required for a job. And if you degrade those skills, it's an unrealistic expectation for that person to be able to perform in the field.
Correct. Absolutely. And to that point, there are jobs that I don't think and this is personal opinion, I think women are fully capable of doing it. The question has never been, can a woman do a ranger's job? Actually, I believe they can. Fully believe that a woman can do the ranger mission. It's not necessarily the most advantageous because psychologically the woman and the man the man is automatically going to try to protect the woman. So you're going to have a problem there just naturally. So that's something that you don't want to have, that's just nature.
Yeah, I think they call it the damsel in distress syndrome. So essentially,
actually,
it's and it was actually a psychological study that they did, but it was if there is 5 dudes and they're in a firefight and one of them gets shot, they're able to kind of like, hey, pat yourself up till we win the fight, right? But when a female is injured or lost or separated, then the entire team, everybody wants to try and stop what they're doing to go to do that, because it's psychologically we are bioengineered that way. Like we've been engineered to be able to be the protector, the provider, to seek out to to do that type of thing. So it's not necessarily I think society today tries to put like a stigma, like, oh, that's just the way that we've been taught by society. And it's like, no, like we've been engineered that way for a long time. It's just like our chemical makeup. There is a
God
difference.
Engineered us that way.
Exactly.
Guys.
Like there's a complete difference, and there's different hormone levels. Oh, you can get all that stuff. But, I think the biggest thing is for the military, it's not a place for standards to be degraded just because it's socially acceptable for certain things. So,
right.
Yeah. So as far as whenever you got to a regiment and you were kind of getting spun up for your first deployment, what was your mind thinking in terms of like, do you remember that mindset you were having? Were you nervous? Were you like, I need more training? What were you thinking?
I was excited. I didn't feel like I needed more training. Like actually my first, like my story, I wish I had the story where I could go and say, no shit, there I was in grenade pins and brass, and I was launching, we were on a foot patrol in Afghanistan, and we got ambushed, and I say that very loosely because it was really, again, as always, it's a very unfair fight.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back after having all the deployments I had both in the military and out of the military, I go like it really is. It was really unfair. It's like almost like a video game where, hey, we're going to play a video game and the other team is just going to freeze. They're not allowed to, they're just going to run around and not know what they're doing. And we're just going to shoot you.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much what it felt like. But
yeah.
In the sense, in the moment, I was 17 or 18 years old. When I deployed my first time with regiment, and the first round cracked past my head, and I felt like it was the closest thing that was ever just. And then they started zipping, zing, 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 and I froze, completely froze. I was right next to my my team leader. He like looked at me because I had my gun pointed in the direction of fire, and he was like, he was shooting. He was looking at me, and he's like, "Are you gonna fucking shoot?"
Yeah.
He started screaming at me, and we were close enough to where he like moved over to me and just completely backhands me. His watch catches my face, freaking hooks my face up, and I'm like, "What the hell?" And I like start returning fire, and and then we got back to our fob, and I was sitting on the stoop of the B hut. And actually, we didn't have B huts then. We still had GP mediums in Afghanistan. We didn't have the B huts built yet. And I was sitting there, and I just had my hands in my lap like this, and I was staring at the ground, going, "What in the hell did I get myself into?" And I remember just weeping. And this guy that I was really good friends with, he had walked by me, and he was like, and he just looks me dead in the face, and he goes, "Yo, bro, it gets totally easier. It totally gets easier, buddy." And he goes, I'm like, and I looked at him and I said, "How?" And he goes, "You find God. I promise it gets easier." And I thought I knew God, at that moment. And I was like, holy moly. I was like, okay. And then really from that moment on, it was pretty smooth running. We would take contact, and I do what I was supposed to do, right? Train. My team leader pulled me aside. He was such a good dude. Like, he was such, like, in this moment, it was, because what I don't realize is these guys were younger than I am now. They were in there maybe 21 or 22 years old, E5s or E6s. And he said, "Hey, don't ever effing do that again, or you'll be gone." He's like, and then he repeated what my buddy said. He said, "Hey, it does get easier. Just do what you're told. I will never put you in a situation I would never put myself in." And I was like, "Roger, Sergeant," and I moved out, and then from that moment on, I focused on it. And then it was really funny because when you're that young, you weren't taking things seriously. You're just memorizing the Ranger Handbook. You're just memorizing these things. But you don't understand why.
Right.
And then you get put in that situation. It's literally kind of like the Bible. It's like, why do I need to memorize Bible verses? Well, I'm not always going to have the Bible.
Right.
And in that moment of being in that spiritual warfare, I'm going to need to execute. And the Bible is the Ranger Handbook of life.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to need to be able to execute those task conditions and standards immaculately, because you're always going to fall back on your basic level of training.
Correct.
And that's what makes everyone looks at us and goes, "Oh, that guy was special forces, or that guy was a ranger, or he was special this." And they're like, "Well, what makes us special?" What makes us special is that we have the basics down at an expert level, meaning it is second nature, and our base level is immaculate. So that basic level of training is, so no matter how bad things get, we're going to fall back. If you don't have the basics down immaculately, your next level is just nothingness.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because and that totally applies so much into literally any other skill set, whether it's sports. I know for shooting, like when we're teaching in class, it's all about there's no such thing as advanced catching in football. So there's no such thing as advanced shooting. It's just being really efficient and fast at the basics. And so it applies so much. And so that's what cracks me up if I'll see a course where it's advanced whatever. And it's like, no, I mean, maybe for tactics if you want, but at the end of the day, it just goes back to the basics of the Ranger Handbook, basic SUT and basic maneuver skills, and just being really good at it. And I think that, like you were talking about in the Bible, it goes back to understanding the foundation of the message of what Christ brings, and having the discipline, because at the end of the day, it takes discipline to read the Bible every day. It takes discipline to pray. It takes discipline to master the basics, versus, I think a lot of people can fall into that rhythm of oh, okay, yeah, I've read a couple times, I get it, and it's like, no, it has to be constantly practiced and constantly rehearsed to be effective.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
And it applies because when you get out, so it being an entrepreneur. So as you guys know, I said being homeless as well. So, I'll kind of go into a little bit of that, because the discipline and the mindset in which I left Ranger Regiment doesn't necessarily apply in the business world. You can't walk into your facility when you have multiple employees and be like, Hey, why the F isn't this done? Hey, everyone, go ahead and get your 2-quart and get in the front lean and rest. That doesn't apply in the real world, right? That applies in Ranger Regiment. It may apply in the military or in a selection environment, but that doesn't apply. And people walk around, or, someone starts to complain or cry or not, and then you're like, oh, yeah, you're effing, choice word insert there. That's not what. That doesn't work. That doesn't apply. So what we have to do is we have to take the things that we learned in the military and start picking how and what it does. So that being said, typical story, got out, worked for a defense contract company. While I was working there, simultaneously ended up going through a divorce. That divorce got really nasty. Debt to income ratio increased. Because of the
legal fees and all that stuff.
Legal fees and stuff like that, yeah. And all of a sudden, my clearance got flagged. So like, hey, we got to pull you off this job because your clearance is now flagged temporarily until you can get this fixed. We're not firing you, but we're going to put you somewhere else. Well, I really didn't want to be put anywhere else, and I also knew that meant a massive pay cut. So I was kind of like stuck in limbo. And, was going to lose a lot of money. Right. So, at the time, I basically was like, what jobs are out there? Well, my next door neighbor at the time was a commercial diver. And he's like, man, come work with us. It's almost like a deployment schedule, and you go out for a month here, a couple weeks there. I didn't realize it was going to be a couple months here, a couple months there, offshore. But you got to go to this academy, and I found out that there are VA approved commercial dive academies. So I was like, I was a special forces combat diver. I'm a master diver. Oh, this sounds like a good fit.
Yeah.
So I went to school, and it was 6 months long, and it worked out great. And I got out, but what I found out was it was kind of like being in Ranger Regiment, where you got to earn your way to Ranger school, you know, and then it's called being a tender, the dude holding the hose. And I got super freaking lucky. Dude got a ear infection and sat on a job that I was on. I was a DMT at the time, dive medical technician. That's what that stands for. They said, hey, the DMT's coming out. We need one to come in. And it ended up essentially what they call breaking out right in that moment, and went in and started doing some sat diving. I actually preferred the surface supplied because you got paid more, dollar a foot instead of a day rate. And my income went it jumped astronomically, actually more than I was making if I was defense contracting or anything, upwards of $1,000 a day.
Wow.
But that discipline that I had, the sand drills, the rock drills, the things that I learned were crucial in being successful as a commercial diver, because in those environments, you're diving at hundreds and hundreds of feet on mixed gas. And sometimes when you get to your job site, the success of the job is not only you as a diver, but it may be the other diver setting you up for success, or you setting up the next diver on that job for success, and knowing where everything is. In an extreme, because you can't see.
Yeah.
Sometimes you cannot see anything. So you would have to have everything like, hey man, you're going to come up to this flange, and 6 inches from the top bolt, you're going to have a crescent wrench or your pneumatic tool. I've got this draped over here. This is draped over there. So because you may only have, if you're doing a surface dive, you may only have 15 minutes of bottom time to get to work and get as much done as possible before they're pulling you up and splashing the next diver.
Wow.
And that's if I'm doing surface. And it's really, really important. And that really helped a lot as having been at Ranger Regiment, having done that. Because you get the guys that were divers that paid for it out of pocket. The only job they ever had was Mickey D's, and it showed.
Yeah.
And their idea was, F you, I'm going to make myself look good. And if I make you look bad, I'll be a better diver. Well, that never usually worked out for those guys. Yeah. They didn't hang around very long. Then from there, I ended up losing that job because Obama sent everything overseas.
Wow.
And I went from making $1,300 a day to making $15 an hour sitting on a gate at you know, at a Twix station at the harbor,
Wow.
and from there, and then ended up going through my second divorce. By the way, I have expert marksmanship in divorces. So if you need if you need any advice on divorces, I'm there. But no,
hopefully I don't have to go through that qual.
I pray that you don't. My first marriage was definitely a mutual jackup. The second one was basically a failure because and this goes into the story as well. I ended up, my second marriage failed because I allowed my first marriage to affect my second marriage way too much.
Yeah.
And I was still going through a custody battle during that whole period of time, which was causing financial strife. And my ex-wife, second ex-wife, handled a lot more than she probably should have. So she's a great woman. She's not a bad person by any means. So we called it quits. And in that moment, I lost almost everything.
Wow.
Couldn't afford to pay for food. I had to make sure she was getting paid. It is a broken system. As a matter of fact, when I say it was a broken system, I was literally living under a bridge in Fort Walton. All the money that I was making from going to college was going to her. I had just enough money to pay for a gym membership that had a shower. It was 24/7, so I could get a shower. I could brush my teeth. Obviously I could stay mentally fit. There were days where, like they would have donuts at the front of the gym, and at the end of the night, they would leave them overnight and I would take those. At the end of the day, like when they were sitting there at midnight, still sitting there, that's what fed me.
Yeah.
Right. So It was really bad. Ended up meeting and this went on for, little more than 6 months.
Wow.
And so I was driving my car to Panera, doing my school, and then finally landed a better job. Started working more, and now I could afford, an apartment so I could see my kids, because at the time I couldn't see my kids because I didn't have a place to live.
Yeah.
And
how was that mentally for you? I know I'm a parent myself. I mean, how was that struggle? Was that something that kind of drove
hard.
you, or?
So prior to that, it was driving me into a really dark place again. So prior to that, in 2014 or 15, I tried to kill myself.
Wow.
So I tried to take all the VA medication, went out on thing. I was like, I'm a piece of shit. I can't keep a job, even though these were external circumstances that I couldn't control. I ended up needing to, I was just like, I wanted to call it quits. So, in the process of that, I was not going to go down that road again. So I was trying to make myself a better life by going into the medical industry, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
I was starting to have more of a disdain for human life, working in the ERs, the ICUs, the med surges, and all that stuff, because it was, you just see a different side of American society and humanity. And, I said, nah, you know what? At this time, I'm dating my now wife, who's back here getting coffee somewhere. I can hear her. And we were getting back into shooting together. And, I had an apartment at this point in time, and I had literally worked my entire life at that point to pay for furniture and all this stuff. So it was just all going to child support and actually just trying to end up with a life. And we were like, hey, let's start an ammo company. And literally just sorting through ammo. And then we ended up doing it. We were extremely successful at it. COVID hit, so we sold it. In that moment, we ended up reinvesting that into our dog trading business, and it just everything just kind of like God allowed all these things, boom, 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 to start coming together. We looked at, um, like it was just really awesome. But what really was ultimately successful was both my wife and I's mindset and the roles in which we were able to take in the business and realizing, where does God want me? What am I supposed to be doing? And when God wants you somewhere, it becomes really easy. Not saying that the process and the things are easy, but things just kind of seem to fall in place, right?
Right.
Being an entrepreneur is definitely hard. It is definitely difficult. And there's challenges, naturally. But you having the right idea, like for instance, I was like, I'm wasting time here in the hospital going to school to become a medical professional.
Right.
This is stupid. I'm miserable. Most of my day is time sucked by this. I need to take a calculated risk, leave doing what I don't like, put all of my effort into what I do like, build this. And then it was like, oh man, now I'm 4 or 5 years later down the road, it's successful. Now I have a staff. Now I have the ability to not necessarily relinquish the reins, but move on to other things and start building other businesses and going through and having the ability to have that kind of freedom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So kind of, I want to go back to the part where when you were dealing with the homelessness and also, so what got you out of that in terms of like, your mindset for wanting to have an apartment to have access to your kids to be able to see them? What were some of those events that led to you being able to come out of that time and transition to where you were now living in an apartment and then you met your now current wife?
Hold on one second. Fooey, down. No, sir. Dogs.
No.
So the honestly, my suicide attempt. So digressing to that, I had my first business that I started. I did a lot of things on a handshake. Hey, and I'm sure you've dealt with this as an entrepreneur, and especially our own community is very toxic. Veterans are very entitled. For whatever reason, we leave the military and we just turn into these self-entitled pricks.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to square you away. I got you, bro. No problem. And I ended up losing $3.5 million.
Wow.
In a business deal. And coupled with that, coupled with a divorce, coupled with a custody battle simultaneously, when I took all the medication that the VA was giving me at the time, which is why I don't take practically any meds anymore, I was sitting on the East Jetty Pass and I was like, this is going to be so much better. I still have the suicide note sitting in this phone and I read it every once in a while to remind myself of how mentally gone I was at that point.
Wow.
And there's nothing that anyone could have said or done to me that changed my mind in that moment. Took the meds, and as I was laying there and staring at the stars, an unbelievable amount of terror just came over me. And I'm like going in and out of consciousness, and I'm going, this is it. I'm about to die. And my last thought, or what I thought was going to be my last thought, was, what the F did I just do? My kids are going to be raised by someone else, and I'm going to have no ability to guide them in their life at all. All of my life experiences, all of the things I've been through, in my first wife with my daughters, the only things those girls are going to know are a bunch of lies from her, which, and I'm like, and I just literally took that ability to do that away. So fast forwarding, obviously I wake up the next morning, 24 hours later, with this awesome tritone, sunburn, blisters all over me, being sternum rubbed by an awesome police officer from the 82nd Airborne who sat there and talked with me for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And did not Baker Act me. The things that officer, and if you're out there listening, reach out to me. Been looking for you. But gets me emotional every time.
Sure.
But when I got into that position of being homeless, it was leaving my son and my daughters without a father and quitting was not an option at that point. Having been through that experience, though I was choosing a permanent solution for a very temporary problem, was not the answer. And being in that homeless situation, you get down to really the bare necessities of life. What is it that I really need? What is it that really matters? Well, I need food. I need shelter. Okay, I'm in college, so I need Wi-Fi of some kind, but I can't afford it. And I really don't need to be having people smell me all the time. So I need a shower of some kind. And I started going to the Love's gas station to get showers there. But then I was like, well, I just paid $40 this month in showers, essentially, where I could have spent that on the gym membership. Now I've got a gym membership and I'm able to stay mentally and physically fit, which was the best decision I made. And I returned all those finances over to basically getting a gym membership. And I started looking at, and it's almost your SEER school training takes over. What's important, what's not, and let's move on, right? And as I did that, okay, I got a little bit of extra money here. Let me set this off to the side. Okay, I got a little bit here. Let me do this. And then before I knew it, that $10 turned into $1,000. And then now I had enough for a down payment on an apartment complex. Right. Because remember, and it gets a broken system, I'm paying child support to my first wife and I'm paying child support to my second wife at this point. So I didn't have anything, and I was, I didn't want either one of my wives to go without, especially my second wife, because we were in that moment, we were in the middle of that second divorce.
Right.
So it's not, and please, for all you listening out there, please don't hate on her. It's not the system that she's created. It's the system that our country has created in the family law system. That's definitely something that needs to be obviously refined and fixed, but unfortunately it's just not the case at this moment. So in that whole, that's really what kept me sane was, hey, there is going to be a better life. And there are a lot of other people out there that had it worse than me, that came from nothingness, that were able to build from something. So really getting down to that, I don't need a new car. I don't need new clothes. I don't need those new kicks. And for me, it was like, at that point, I started selling off everything. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have all the guns that I had. I sold them all. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that my dad wasn't giving me any of my stuff that he wanted me to inherit, because he knew that, and they didn't even know how bad it was, but he knew I was pawning stuff.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to he was like, man, I don't want to give this to you because you're just going to pawn it.
Yeah.
It was like, and, which was probably a good thing.
Yeah. No.
And so that was mentally where I was. And honestly, it's what got me to where I am now, because now, I live on an awesome ranch. I wouldn't say I'm financially free, but I'm not under a bridge, and I've built several extremely successful businesses. But also that goes back to mindset. I don't think, even if I was a billionaire, I would never go, oh, I'm not financially free, because the moment you start feeling that way is when you start becoming frivolous and start making poor decisions.
Yeah. So you had to pretty much, you went through in where you experienced, obviously the training from the military kind of helped you with dealing with the rigors of life and training your mind to be able to deal with those harsh things.
Right.
And then getting into a point where you have a ton, you have a lot of nice things, you have a lot of financial freedom, and then having that all stripped away to literally nothing. That's kind of a massive roller coaster of emotions, and I think you were dealing with from that time.
Absolutely. Perseverance is the best way to describe it, is having an immense amount of perseverance. And, I don't have anything to back it up, but I think perseverance also comes from a lot of adversity in life going into it. Having in my childhood, I had the best childhood, right?
Mm.
But perseverance can come a lot of different ways. Some people get perseverance through, foster care systems and, horrible child trauma and stuff like that, and having to persevere through that. Mine was, a learning disability and bullying. Just I had severe dyslexia. I was homeschooled. I was made fun of it.
Mm.
People who know me personally, like I'm easy to make fun of because it just rolls off my back.
Yeah.
And currently, now where I'm at, in our industry, it's a very toxic industry, both the gun world and the dog world.
Yeah.
They're identical. And
Wow.
it's like, oh, you were never a military dog handler and you were never a military or a law enforcement dog handler. It's like, that's not completely accurate. I was never a military dog handler. But to say I was never a dog handler is kind of an inaccurate statement because I was a dog handler for several agencies,
Mm.
but not in the sense of, having gone to official military dog handler school.
Right.
And so I get hated on constantly by people going, and I'm like, well, that mindset is like saying, in the gun world, well, because you're not special forces and haven't been to combat, you don't have a right to talk about tactics or teach the fundamentals of shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about more of the dog people. You got the Jerry Bradshaws, the Ben Lipinskis. You've got all these other people who are complete civilians that have never been a dog handler in their life in the military, yet they're out there teaching Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, all these people on tactics and techniques of how to utilize and employ their dog. But they've never once set foot in combat or, and you've got people out there in the military world that you and I both know, can't think of anybody off the top of my head, that haven't really done a whole lot, that are teaching things, and it's still good information.
Yeah, that's
and
that's such a true point. I actually wanted to, before we get into that, because that's a big portion of stuff I want to talk about. Your life story from the time you're in the military to you coming out of hardship literally reminds me of the story of Job. Where God gives, for those who haven't read this story or are not familiar, essentially Job has everything. He has multiple houses, he has the most amount of cattle, he has all the riches, huge family, and Satan comes to God and is like, hey, I can make him fumble and curse your name because you've given him everything, so of course he's going to be thankful for it. And God pretty much tells Satan like a bet, like, no, he'll stand strong and I'll take, everything can be taken away from him, but he's still never going to curse my name. And so essentially Satan goes and literally his family gets killed. He loses all his cattle, all of his servants and his household is destroyed. And he's literally just like homeless, essentially, has nothing. And even his friends came by and his wife would just curse God and die. But he never would curse the Lord's name. And so in return, because of his faithfulness, God rewarded him tenfold. And I think it's one of those things where, listening to your story, where God has allowed these, not necessarily made these things happen to you. I think that we all have free choice in that, it's almost like, for example, the best way I've heard it told to me is you have seen the Super Bowl and you've already recorded it on DVR or whatever it's called, on VHS. You record the Super Bowl on VHS, and you're trying to tell somebody who hasn't seen it yet, you already know who's going to win the game, but for them, if you don't tell them, they have no idea what's going to happen, so they're letting things play out, and those football players are still making the same decision. So if you're in the future, you record this, and you know what's going to happen, those football players still have free will in the moment playing the game. You just have an idea of what's going to happen. So I think that God allows us to walk on those, like you said, if you're walking in Him and you're following His plan for your life, it becomes easier because this is what He has set out for you to do, not because He's forcing you, but because He is saying, this is what I designed you for, this purpose, and this is the best role you're going to fit in. Now it's up to you whether you go in that role or not. And so I'm myself extremely hard-headed, and usually fight and, kick and scream the entire way trying to go do my own thing. And I always end up falling and reverting back to his plan.
Going back, right.
Exactly. And it's like
Every
you're trying
time.
to bust out of the mold, but he's like nudging you back. And the terrifying thought of it is I don't want to be in a position one day where God says, he's trying to, almost like you're in a wagon, he's pulling you up a hill, and you just keep smacking his hand, saying, let me go, let me do my own thing. But he knows if you let him, he lets you go, your wagon's going down that hill, and you're going to crash. And my fear is that I rebel against him and his will for my life so much that he doesn't fight me, and he just lets go. And he says,
and that's part of, sometimes it's required. Sometimes you have to be at rock bottom to be able to get back on that right path. And you'll have an ultimate decision, which thank God I made I call my suicide attempt my greatest failure, because when that happened, and I actually talk about this on Eddie Gallagher's podcast, Shoot Me Straight, that I was just on a little while ago about, I had to redefine my life, and I had to start working for others, which is why I started going into the medical field. I had to start focusing. I got involved in GSMSG, and I was their director of forward deployed operations for several years.
Wow.
And I was going over doing these humanitarian aid missions and helping with, them and their nursing programs, and helping them with their 18 Deltas and 18 series, going out and teaching, and all these special operations guys teaching the TCCC to our allied fighting forces in places, as you can currently see, they're operating in all places like the Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all that other stuff. And these guys are going out, they're not getting paid to do that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to give back to society. I'm going to give back to the places that I went and fought in. And, and that was part of like why I wanted to go there, because I also had a lot of guilt at the time too for some of the stuff. I was like, the destruction that we brought to Iraq was immense. And then, furthermore, you have to really give back for you to really find that core of who you really are. Because when it's constantly like you're grabbing for that money and you're grabbing for that next big accolade or whatever it is, you may achieve it, but it will come very empty. Like the diving stuff. Oh, that's a really cool job. It looks super elite. It's like I'm an astronaut, but reverse, and and you're
that's
living
exactly
in
how I thought of it.
Right. And it's just like when you do it, you're like, it's almost also the same as in the military. It's like people go, oh, did you do it? You did it for God and country. No, there comes a point in your military career where it's no longer God and country. It becomes completely self-serving and all about you.
100%.
You want to go to the next big school. You want the next big merit badge. You want the next big mission, because you want the bragging rights and the ability to stand there and puff your chest out and say, you weren't there, I was. And everyone's like, I'm the most operator of the operator. And it becomes a very toxic mentality. Yes, it started off very innocent and very much so patriotic, but it ends very self-serving. Same thing with the commercial diving. And the moment it became that for me, it was almost in a sense quite literally overnight taken away, and I had to move on to the next thing. But then it was like, what am I doing again? And then the moment that I realized that you cannot sustain something that's self-serving, it always has to be about everyone else. You have to constantly keep your focus, your mindset on serving, having a servant's mindset to sustain anything. I don't care whether you're a nurse. I don't care if you're a entrepreneur. I don't care if you're a trash man. Everything that we do, if you're working at Lowe's, everything that we do is service related, right? If you're just showing up to collect a paycheck, you will go absolutely nowhere. Nowhere. What you're doing right now, this podcast, you're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this to put out information for other people that hopefully will hear it and help them. If you're at the range and you're teaching people how to shoot, you're not there to talk about how cool you once were. You're there to teach somebody information, right? Does what you used to do gain validity for you? Yeah, but I also know people who haven't done shit in their past and are still putting out the same information that are doing way better than some of the people who haven't.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Or
100%.
have.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying.
Have the were, super special in their previous life, but they're not utilizing, they're not performing on demand. They're not keeping up with their skill sets. Just relying on the past to be able to carry them forward and give them validity.
They peaked in Ranger Regiment, or they peaked in something else, in some other unit, and their training and everything ended there because I'm the master of this. And I hate that word. I hear it all the time. I was given the title master, or whatever the case may be. I'm like, no. Like, the moment you arrogantly claim that, like, you're going to get schooled. Like, yeah, in the military, they have these things that are called master ratings, and that's literally for, like, promotion and crap like that. But you don't hear about someone being called the master doctor, the master nurse. They have they're called practitioners, and that was like, no. They have a practice for a reason, because they're constantly a student of their craft. And a humble, if we can find one. You don't hear a master aviator.
Yeah.
They don't call them that.
Yeah, I think
they don't even. Yeah.
I think that whenever you have, this is something that Roy and I talk about a lot. Is the sad thing is, like, for example, let's just use the shooting journey as a analogy. But whenever somebody has stopped going to training, they stopped dry firing, let's just say they were a Grand Master and Delta Force or something of that nature, and they no longer are seeking new information, no longer willing to learn. Then the sad thing is they've come to the end of their journey and they have nothing left to give, right? I think it's so important, especially for a teacher, to continuously be in a position where you're learning new things and you're continuing to give back things that you're learning on your journey that is going to last until the end of your life, right? Like Jerry Mitchlick, super old, still the fastest shooter in the world, but he's still learning. He says, I can always be more fast, I can always be more accurate. So, whenever someone has stopped learning or they've become the master and they no longer need it, sadly, they've reached the end of their journey and they don't really have much to provide you. Because, at the end of the day, things continue to evolve. Technology comes in, new skills are introduced. There's a newer, faster, better way to do things. And so, you have to evolve or you just fade away. And so I think that's something that, when we talk about masculinity, one of the traits that, essentially all of that portion of the conversation is about is just humility. Having the humility to be able to learn something new, to be able to say, I don't know it all, because at the end of the day, I will gain and benefit from humility because I have room in my cup left for more knowledge, which makes me more capable. So having that humility and also, having that perseverance through hardships, I think are masculine traits that we in society now are being told is a bad thing. Yeah. You need to have pride in yourself. Pride is everywhere. We have, rely on somebody else. Somebody else will do it for you. Just color within the lines. That type of thing is now being taught and making masculinity something to be the traditional sense of the word, to be something that is a negative connotation, right? You're a bigot if you fall into that masculine category. And I think that's something that a lot of guys in our society today, and I think the reason why there's so many, dudes in the gun community that look for guys that were in Delta or guys that were regiment or special ops guys or whatever, is because they are looking to see, oh, that's a masculine job. That's a masculine dude. I want to be like that. We have this innate desire to want to do that because society has been telling us, no, we can't. And so you're seeing this huge drive towards people trying to emanate those individuals. The sad thing is it's a false sense of masculinity with a lot of vets because they lack the humility to be able to say, I am just like you. I can, you know what I'm saying? Like for me, my background, guess what? Like I don't consider myself to be better than anybody else. I don't consider to be myself better than, Roy, who's my business partner and friend. I have so much more I can learn from him. Just like in class, I could even learn something from my student. They could do something that's better, a better way to do something, and I could take that away. But I think that we have in the gun industry, and I think it drifts over from the military world, there is a toxic culture that is leaching in it's already leached into the gun community, in the defense training world, in the dog world, it sounds like. And it's not just the military, but law enforcement included, that have leached that toxicity and that ego, where I think that's one thing that we in our podcast are trying to change the culture of that by crushing that, making it quote unquote cringy to be egocentric.
And that's exactly. We need to be lifting each other up. And it's like, if your business model is to destroy somebody else. Now, I will caveat this with something people don't understand. It is so strange to me where veterans will do something and they don't take responsibility for their actions. Okay, I'll get like veteran. Veteran beats up police officer. Veteran gets a DUI. Veteran freaking has all these other issues, right? And they don't take responsibility for those actions. And then somebody else goes and says, hey, what do you think about this person? Or you see a friend of yours going to somebody and you're like, they're my friend and I would be remiss if I didn't warn them. And they're going, oh, you're talking shit. Nope. Hey, pause.
Mm-hmm.
It's like and I'll use this as an example. There's a very fine difference between talking shit and talking about what you did and allowing somebody to make the proper decision on whether they want to work with you or not. Those are called consequences.
Yeah.
And sometimes the choices that we make are with us forever. Perfect example, myself. Yeah, hey man, that guy Byron, he cheated on his wife like a freaking crazy man, and he was a complete piece of shit. Am I mad that someone said that, or even goes on social media and says that? Nope. Why? I did it. And it's a consequence for that. And guess who I have to answer to from now until the cows come home? My 2 little girls. Because my first wife, I was a dirtbag.
Yeah.
I was a complete and thorough dirtbag. Now, can I change? Absolutely. My wife knows all about it. But guess what? She had to make a choice whether she wanted to be with that or not. Could have been a real big red flag for her and say, hey, man, I don't want to be with you. And guess what? Many women did. I don't want to be with you. After I openly talked about that to them, I never heard from them again.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have that. That's a consequence of my actions. And people can change. Yeah, they can. But guess what? If a pedophile goes and does pedophile things, goes to prison and then gets out, he's a registered sex offender and has to register everywhere he goes. And if he comes to me and says, hey, I want to get a job from you, I'm going to go, no. Why?
Yeah.
That's the consequence because of what you chose to do 20 years ago. I don't care if you're a changed man.
Yeah.
That is your choice. You chose to go out and do bad things as a veteran. I don't care if you're a hero. I don't care if you have a TV series or you were on a TV show. I don't care if you got a Medal of Honor. If you're a shitbag, you're a shitbag.
Yeah.
And you made poor choices and said stupid things that you can now never take back. And I want no part of that.
Well, I think it goes also to when you're saying accepting responsibility, you take that thought process about the first, second, third, fourth order of effects of your actions. That should help dictate, man, maybe my decision-making process, like maybe I should think twice before doing X and Y.
Correct.
And I think that goes back to same thing with humility and having solid, real masculine traits of having, if I make a promise, and I tell this to my kids all the time, don't make a promise that you can't keep. If I make a promise, then I have to stick by that. I mean, my word is everything. You can take away everything from me in terms of possessions, but my honor and my word is the only thing that can't be taken from me. That is the only thing I can actually give up. Accepting responsibility. And also, if I accept responsibility, that means that's going to dictate my decision-making process about what I decide to do, what I decide to say. And I've made poor decisions, and sometimes I've paid for those still. So it's one of those things where, if you're putting negativity out, you're putting evil out, you're putting laziness out, then that's what you're going to get back. And sometimes those decisions have a ripple effect that lasts a little bit longer than others. But I think it goes back. If you have no humility, well, then you can do no wrong, right? You have pride. There's nothing wrong I can do. It's not my fault. I'm too good for that. It's somebody else's fault, or this is the excuses as to why this is happening. And I think that goes back to when, in old times, like when someone said, I will, what's that one? I think it's in Robin Hood, and Russell Crowe, this is the new one. Russell Crowe, he gives his word to bring back this fallen knight's sword back to his family. He gives his word. He doesn't have a written contract and stuff like that. Now I understand that's smart business-wise, but we've lost that sense of holding our oaths, being true to our promises, being true to our word, doing what we say we're going to do. I think that we've lost that in society because it's just like, we've become so self-centered and so selfish that it's no longer important.
Right. And that's one of the things that are, I think another thing that our community ends up breeding in our community is just, it's not toxic masculinity. It's people who are just not humble. They're narcissistic. And because when they were in the military, it was a constant member measuring contest all the time. We had to measure that. And it was, and I kind of feel like, the Army got it really wrong, because I see a lot of it in the Army, because in the Army, most of the training in the Army is not pipelined. You want Halo school, you got to fight for it and get on a OML, order merit list. You want to go to Ranger school, you better be freaking. It's a constant competition. You're constantly competing to go to these next schools, or you're absolutely hated and they're trying to get you to a school so you fail. To kick you out of the unit, right? So we kind of screwed up, I think, in the Army by doing that instead of just pipelining our special operations, and everyone is on the same playing field. And they say, well, competition creates and breeds a better person. Well, you can do that in other ways, but when it comes to skill, tasks, and abilities, it doesn't really work that way. The Navy SEALs, everyone walks in there. They've already got diet school. They've already got Halo school. They've already got all these different things. And I've actually seen it in their community where they got dirt bags too, but they cover down on their dirt bags. Like, I have physically seen Navy SEALs hear another dude, Army, Air Force, talk shit about another Navy SEAL that we all know is a dirt bag. And then the Navy SEAL that's present goes like, don't see you having a trident. Don't see you ever being on SEAL team such and such.
Yeah.
He's done more and did more than you'll ever do. Right. So shut your mouth. And I'm like, whoa, that's freaking pretty stand up. And that's pretty cool. Never heard that in our community, because people just want to sit there and, oh, you're a LARPing fake. That was actually one of the most recent ones that I got. It was cool to see some people come to the rescue and defend me, but I didn't feel like I needed to defend myself. No. I've never done it. Never gone public to talk crap about somebody else, and never gone public to defend myself in general. For the most part, there were a few times where I've made a post, but here and there. But for the most part, it's like the proof is in the pudding. Yeah. Because you just work harder. Don't let it get you down. And eventually those naysayers, those people, those toxic masculinity I throw that in air quotes. It's not a real thing, but the toxic humans, because there's toxic humans. There's no toxic masculinity. There's masculinity and then there's femininity. But that toxic mentality ends up just dying. Yeah. But I can assure you, the more success that any of you out there get, the more haters you're going to receive. Yeah. But you look at it, it's like, I have a 10,500 square foot training facility, the largest training facility on the Eastern Seaboard. He's a dirtbag and he's a fake. Okay.
I have a 10,000 square foot training facility.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I also have a gun shop in there,
Yeah.
and I also have two nonprofits that are benefiting our community and helping veterans get service dogs at no cost to that veteran, where the VA is trying to charge between $25,000 and $36,000 out of their pocket. What veteran has that kind of liquid cash?
Wow.
Very few.
Yeah.
And that's what actually got me into dogs. Like, I wasn't any of those things. I had to get a service dog because after my suicide attempt, when I moved away from Utah and I came back to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, I had to report and get set up at the VA over there. And they're like, hey, you're not taking your meds, and we're going to take away your medical disability if you don't start taking meds. I said, I can't. I work in an ER. And they're like, well, we don't care.
Wow.
Well, I said, there's got to be a different option. So then they said, hey, here's your option. You can get a service dog. Call this number. So I'll leave the company's name unmentioned, but that company is a local company here. I called them, and they're like, we need a credit card, and we want to take they're going to charge me basically, I think it was like $36,000 for a service dog.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, I can't afford that. I was homeless at the time.
Yeah.
I was literally in the moment of moving into my first apartment. And I had saved all this money to get into this apartment so I could start seeing my kids. And I was like, well, this sucks. And I don't know what to do. So I called up my best friend at the time, and I said, hey, dude, I need some help. Or we're still friends to this day. Not at the time. We're still friends to this day. We were Ranger Regiment together, all that stuff. And he said, hey, we're standing up this nonprofit. And then not only was I the first recipient of Rescue 22's program, but I ended up becoming a board member and fell in love with dog training, and then began interning with, that individual, and then started going to insane amounts of education, went to a dog handler course to become an actual dog handler out in the real world, to pick up gigs here and there and potentially become a full-time dog handler. And thus and I got some really big breaks and became a really good, well-known dog trainer. And that was it. That there's nothing special to it. I wasn't sitting in Afghanistan with a dog or sending dogs through breaches or anything like that, or running the beat as a cop with a dog. That wasn't any of it. I just ended up being really good at it and having a lot of good techniques to be able to fix problems, and they work. And here we sit.
Dang. Frickin'. Daggum. That is crazy. Well, one thing I want to actually hit on, kind of going back to your dive portion, you had, I would love to really pick your brain on some stories that you have from your sat dive times. So what are some, so here we go. We'll go in this order. We'll go, what was one of your most stressful moments down at depth? And then what is one of these like most mysterious thing you've ever experienced down at depth?
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah,
I don't know why I'm still getting calls in. So the most stressful was, we were working on a pipeline. I was on a diver support vessel. So you'll have big, big oil rigs, and then you have these vessels that go around. We were, I don't really remember my depth. It was pretty deep.
Yeah.
Deep enough to where it was pretty dark. And so they have this, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but shiv on the cranes that basically, as the ship would dip and dive, it helps keep the load that when they're lowering a big, several ton piece of whatever, within a few inches.
Wow.
So we were getting some pretty bad weather in, and some seas are coming in, and I was on the, and then they also have these big side engines, right? Propellers that hold that ship in place geographically, plus or minus, 10, 15 feet.
I actually, so yeah, it's that I actually watched a documentary on Netflix, caveat real quick, of this diver that actually I think was in the Black Sea, where that thing malfunctioned in rough seas and it broke his line. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this documentary. I think it's
Yeah,
insane.
I know exactly what you're
Yeah,
talking about. So
crazy.
I actually know a few of the guys that were in that documentary. So,
Oh my gosh.
um, and I don't even remember what. See, I've dove in just about every single ocean that you can possibly imagine. Um, I feel like a pirate right now. I've dove all of the
I've
seven
dove in all the
seas,
seas.
Yeah.
Friggin'
So, and you have your big hard hat on, you're walking on the bottom, and then the dive supervisor's in your ear. And I remember I could hear in the background, it was picking up background, and I heard a bunch yelling and screaming, and they were like, diver, move away, move away, move away. And I just went back. And I remember all this mud coming towards me. And what had happened was that machine that holds that load up and down broke. So now as the ship and that air gap was going, now the load's just smashing on the ground like and I mean, it was like an earthquake on the bottom, but I have no idea. I couldn't see. So I was like essentially running back, and the only thing, and I'm like trying to grab my hose and I'm trying to run, and I'm like, take up slack. And I'm trying to run in the opposite direction. Now I'm getting pulled. So my head, it's attached, goes down here, goes down to here. It attaches to my side and then hooks to my bailout bottle. That bailout bottle is literally just a life-saving device. So if I lose air to the top, I have enough air to get to the dive bell.
If you can find it.
K bottle.
Yeah.
Right. And that has been some things that have happened. And all I could think was that load coming down, hitting my umbilical cord and freaking cutting it. And now I have no air. And now I've ran in a random direction that I wasn't able to keep. And it was just like, and I could hear it. Boom.
Oh my gosh.
Boom. Boom. And I'm like, it's just mud was coming right at me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. So I would say that was probably the most stressful moment. The most mysterious one, we were actually tightening up some flanges on this job. And as I was tightening it, they have this basically like it's a sonar and it's dropped on the bottom of the ocean. And they can see things around you. So they can like see manta rays. And so one of the top killers, I would say, of commercial divers are manta rays.
Really? Explain.
And, so they have their big tentacles on the front or whatever they call them that come off their face. Yeah. And so they fly, right? And so your umbilical cord comes down to you. And when they fly and they that gets connected in that, their first reaction is to bolt to the surface. Wow. And they'll bolt to the surface, ripping you off the ground, bringing you up tons of feet, potentially. And then they release you, and then it gets loose. It either brings you to the surface or it brings you to the bottom. So then you end up having all these dive injuries, AGE, air gas embolism, and all this other stuff. And then you're free falling essentially with no ability to slow yourself down. So you've got all this equipment and weight on, and then you end up breaking your leg or hitting something, and it's not good. So during this period of time, there was a bunch of that we saw. So I was working on the on this flange. We're tightening it up, and they were like, "Hey, diver, you got a large object moving on your left, coming towards you." And I was like, "Okay." So I actually took my umbilical and I wrapped it, and I was like, "Oh man," I was like. And I don't know why I did that. I probably shouldn't have done it. I was like, looking back on it, it's probably not the smartest move because it probably would have broke my leg or my arm when I was like, it pinned me against the thing. But I was like, but that's what went through my head.
It made sense at the time.
It made sense at the time. Looking back, I'm like, I don't know if that was the smartest move. But anyways, and I'm just continuing to work and I'm doing my thing because I'm on a time hack and I'm doing my thing. And I remember you have a camera that's sitting on your helmet and you have a light. And I looked up and when I looked up, all I saw was scales and they were just moving. What? And I was like, oh shit. Yeah. And I looked back down and I can hear the guys on the other end of the radio, like they're like laughing. And I'm like, bro, like if I look back down and I keep working, it's not
Yeah.
there. And then as it passed me, the fin, was actually, waving back and forth. It blew me up off my feet
So it didn't
and I
even
fell on
hit
my
you.
side.
It blew you.
Didn't even hit me. It just blew me.
Oh
And
my
to
gosh.
this day, I do not know what it was, but it was in this moment I realized I was not the apex predator at the bottom of the ocean, and there's other things in this world that could I was like, I'm about to be freaking Jonah.
Oh
This is
my
going
god.
down right
Dude.
now.
Ah. What
So
have
I
you
was
heard? Or good. Sorry, good.
no, that was it. And so I was like, as soon as they were like, hey, it's time for you to head back to the I was like, all right, Raj,
Yeah, I'm
let's
ready.
go.
Have you heard of any other divers that have experienced some mysterious things, or have they told you any stories about some just weird things they have no idea what they were?
Um, Weird lights.
Wait. Weird lights. Explain.
So when you get really deep, luminescence is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also when it's that dark and you have zero outside light, you won't see it. So we had a diver who, sometimes it can be mind tricks. Others it can be, just fish that have luminescence.
Right.
And his camera and light went bad at depth, and so they went ahead and pulled him. And he was like, "Dude, I saw the craziest lights down there and the weirdest things. I forget the fish; it's got the big
Yeah.
bulb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are, and he said he saw so many cool things. And then um, that was probably the craziest thing. I haven't heard of anything other than that. I've had divers talk about hearing, obviously whales and other things.
Mm-hmm.
I've had sea turtles harass me and tried to bonk me on my head because they wanted me to break more. Because they eat the barnacles, to
Oh, they
clean
want
the
you to break
leg
more
on it.
barnacles? That's hilarious.
Yeah, and so that they'll harass you and they can put a hurting on you. But I've heard of divers that actually I was on a dive job in Alaska, and one of the divers there, I had just shown up to Dutch Harbor. I was going on an emergency diver support vessel, just standing by in the harbor there in Alaska, and I guess he could hear a submarine pinging,
Are you serious?
and he could hear. But the thing is like you're right on the American-Russian border, right there in the Aleutian
Wow.
chain. So, no idea how far away that was or whose submarine that was. But they also were working on I believe it was a shell pipeline. And when he came to the surface, there was a rushing patrol boat, and they had dishkas pointed right at their diver support vehicle,
Are you serious?
just on the other side of the geographic,
Wow.
Russian American water line. And I was like, man, I'm so glad I wasn't on that one. I was
That's
like, let's
terrifying.
go.
Jeez. There's actually a video. There's, the commander that just came out. He was the Top Gun squadron commander, but he did the UAP congressional hearing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Commander, not David Grush, Commander something, I can't remember his name, but he was a big deal. He was telling a story actually about there was these, they were doing torpedo drills off of, out at sea, and hit this guy. I think it was a helicopter pilot that actually told him this story, like after he came out and, said everything about what he experienced. And so they were shooting these torpedoes, and when the torpedoes stop, they blow ballast or whatever. They have these balloons, and they come up to the surface, and then a helicopter from the destroyer or wherever will go and pick up the torpedo and bring it back, and they reset it, right? So these training torpedoes are pretty, they're to scale, and they're pretty big. But they said that they went out to go get this torpedo, and the helicopter pilot is lowering the diver to go hook everything up to this torpedo, and the crew chief is looking over, outside, like watching the diver holding his line, and all of a sudden he starts screaming to the pilot to get the diver out of the water. And he said he saw a massive shadow, like you see something underneath the water, you can see the shape and
Oh
shadow of
yeah.
it. He said it was a massive shadow. It was huge, like almost like a like an entire vessel underneath the water, and they pull the diver out the water. The diver has no idea what's going on. As soon as they pull him out the water, the torpedo goes, gets sucked under the water and is gone. What's that?
Oh my God.
What is that? So
the ocean is larger than land, and it is absolutely enormous. And that's the thing is, like, I remember, I had a whale shark come at me once, and I didn't know what it was. It was off in it was really clear water. And then it ended up going to the surface. But when it came to the surface, the tenders that were up there were looking down at it, and they're like, dude, that thing was so huge. And we had on that ship, I think we had like a 30 or 40-foot air gap.
Wow.
Between the deck and the water. And that it's one of those things that, I don't discredit anything when it comes to the ocean. Someone starts talking about the singing of mermaids and mermen, and people start talking about vessels and aliens coming out over in California. And in all honesty, I do not discredit any of it, because or government doing testing and having underwater bases, because I mean, what better place to hide anything you're doing than in an underwater base?
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, G.I. Joe had it right, bro.
They were just conditioning us.
That's it. It was just that preconditioning. They don't have to say it was what's that new thing where they pre-warn us about it through movies and cartoons, and then they don't have to feel bad.
It's interesting. It's interesting how that takes effect, because like now, even like Geico commercials, they have it's all like an alien themed commercial. So who knows? There's going to be some sort of disclosure that's happening. I was listening to it was a news interview with an old CIA agent who was saying that their plan for disclosure to the public for UFOs to be like normal, similar to how AI was rolled out. Like, oh yeah, it was all panicky. Now it's kind of like become normal. We use it for making descriptions on our websites. They are planning to do the same thing with UFOs by 2027, is what this CIA dude was saying. So who knows, man? Who knows? But hey, so what are some final words that you would like to pass on to the listener? Some kind of little nuggets of knowledge and wisdom.
Guys, I'm sitting here in my living room, and I'm looking out over my property, that we just moved into. So we're homesteading, and we're building a ranch with some cattle. And, as I talk about these things, I know many of you, male and female out there, have trials and triumphs, or trials and tribulations. And this too shall pass. If you are having good times, this too shall pass. But your mindset and your ability to persevere and problem solve those things, the same as you did in combat, the same as you did when you were in training, whether you were in the military or not even in the military, these are things that are going to build your story, your credibility, and your ability to overcome and set the example for not only your children, but future generation of people. If you choose to give up, that story ends there. And I promise at some point you will be forgotten. And that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. And that's not, you're cutting yourself short and your story short and your ability to help others. And that's why we're here. We're here to help guide people through this crazy thing we call life. And especially our children. The legacy that you leave are the children that you have, and the people that you surround yourself with. Not your business, not all the accolades. All this stuff is it's a part of my story. It's not who I am. So I mean, perseverance and having, it's all achievable. Like, the only thing that's not achievable is the very thing that you tell yourself that you can't achieve. Oh, that's impossible. If my dumbass can do it, anybody can do it. There's physically nothing that you are not capable of doing. And furthermore, always be positive. Be positive of others. There's no point. You're going to get nowhere by trashing somebody else, making stuff up to try to make yourself look better, or validate your point, whatever that is. And also, you know, accept help. I'll end with that, is that accept help. We did nothing in life without others
Hmm.
and others' advice and help. Um, and if you stand on a hill and don't ask for help, you're going to get nowhere. I'm not where I'm at because I did it all on my own. I'm where I'm at because I have an immaculate team. I have a wife that's extraordinarily supportive and helps me run all of my stuff. And I have mentors that have helped me through hard times and also taught me many great lessons. You may have a boss right now that's a big dirtbag. Good. He's going to teach you a lesson of maybe what not to do. And later on down the road, when you're a boss, you just don't act like that.
Hmm.
I sounded like Jocko right there, but I didn't even intend to, but like it's all a lesson and you got to pay attention. And if you change your mentality to every single thing that I encounter, good, bad, or indifferent, is a lesson, the sky is the limit.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Byron, for your story. And like I said, I feel like I'm talking to a modern day Job, and it's super inspiring to hear you tell your story. And we'll definitely have to have you come back on for sure, especially to talk about maybe your homesteading journey and how that's going. So,
I will let you know. We'll do it live from the back of a horse or something.
yeah. Well, real quick before we do our outro and our closing, where can people find you about your work, your company, and how can they get a hold of you if they need to?
If you guys are looking for dogs and protection dogs or wanting any information on the dog world, btscanine.com. That is my profit side. If you are a veteran that needs a service dog, you can reach out to the rescue22foundation.org. And then if you guys are interested in the Hunters and Heroes and what we're doing there, which is fairly new, we'll be starting a podcast for that fairly shortly. You can find us at huntersandheroes.org as well. And then, as always, just reach out to me in my personal Instagram, Byron_BTSK9, and I'll answer all your guys' questions if you have anything in regards to entrepreneurship, dogs, all that jazz.
Awesome. Well, cool, guys. Thank you again so much, Byron, for coming and hanging out with us. And also for you, the listener, if you have the opportunity, go check out those outlets to be able to connect with Byron and the organizations that he's affiliated with, as well as listen to his new podcast. So thanks again, guys, for listening. Make sure you guys train to be the asset, don't be the liability, and we'll see you on the next episode. I'll see you, Byron.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
See ya.